The phone rang at exactly 11:43 on a Tuesday morning, cutting through the peaceful silence of my San Jose apartment like a knife through butter. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my stomach drop. Richard Brennan, my father, the man who hadn't called me in over 3 years, was suddenly reaching out, and something told me this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. I answered on the fourth ring, keeping my voice steady. "Hello, Dad." His voice exploded through the speaker with the same authoritative tone I remembered from childhood. "Jimmy, you need to get home right now. Your mother is planning Sunday dinner and you will be here. If you don't show up this time, I'm cutting off your college funding permanently. Do you understand me?" I sat back in my ergonomic office chair, staring out at the California sunshine streaming through my floor-to-ceiling windows. A small smile tugged at my lips as I prepared to deliver news that would shatter whatever fantasy my parents had been living in. "Dad, there's something you should know," I said calmly, my fingers drumming against my mahogany desk. "I graduated from college over a year ago. And just so we're clear on the financial situation, I'm currently earning about 7 times your annual salary as a senior software engineer." The silence that followed was so profound I could hear the distant hum of traffic from Highway 101 below my 20th floor apartment. When Richard finally spoke, his voice had lost all its bluster. What do you mean you graduated? You're still in your senior year at Wisconsin." I leaned back, memories flooding through me like water through a broken dam. Growing up in Madison, Wisconsin, I had learned early that invisibility was my default setting in the Brennan household. My father worked 70-hour weeks as an insurance adjuster, arriving home after 9 each night with his shoulders hunched and his briefcase heavy with files he'd spread across the dining room table. My mother, Susan, spent her days orchestrating her social calendar with the precision of a military general, attending charity luncheons, book clubs, and neighborhood association meetings that kept her busy from sunrise to sunset. Dinner in our house was a solitary affair for me. Each evening, I would heat up whatever leftovers existed in our oversized refrigerator, sitting alone at the kitchen island, while my parents occupied the living room. Richard would be absorbed in case files' red pen moving across documents with mechanical efficiency. Susan would be positioned in her favorite armchair scrolling through social media on her tablet, occasionally calling out comments about neighbors' vacation photos or children's achievements. My younger sister Amanda had always been the golden child, the one who commanded attention simply by existing. When she spoke, conversations stopped. When she needed something, parents materialized instantly. Her dance recitals, cheerleading competitions, and student government campaigns received the full support of the Brennan publicity machine. My academic achievements, science fair victories, and honor roll certificates seemed to disappear into some invisible void the moment I brought them home. The pattern had been consistent throughout my childhood. My 8th birthday fell on the same day as Amanda's regional dance competition 3 hours away in Milwaukee. My parents loaded the minivan with snacks, flowers, and video equipment for her event, while I spent the day alone eating grocery store cake and watching cartoons. When they returned that evening glowing with pride over Amanda's second-place finish, they seemed genuinely surprised to find birthday wrapping paper scattered across the living room floor. High school brought more of the same systematic neglect. When I won the state science fair with a project on renewable energy applications, my parents were attending Amanda's cheerleading nationals in Orlando. The local newspaper wanted to interview our family about having a state champion, but my parents were unavailable for comment. Amanda posted dozens of photos from her trip, while my trophy sat alone on the kitchen counter gathering dust. College acceptance letters arrived during my senior year like promises of escape. Stanford, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, and Georgia Tech all offered full scholarships for my computer science program. I spread the letters across the kitchen table, imagining the pride my parents would feel seeing their son accepted to America's top universities. Instead, Richard glanced at them briefly before asking if I'd seen his reading glasses. Susan commented that the letterhead looked expensive before returning to her phone call about Amanda's sorority rush preparations. That's when I made my decision to attend the University of Wisconsin, staying local, partly out of hope that proximity might finally earn their attention. 4 years later, when graduation approached, I mailed them an invitation with a handwritten note explaining the ceremony details. I called 3 times to remind them about the date. I even offered to reserve seats in the family section. The morning of graduation, I learned my parents had scheduled a family vacation to Cabo San Lucas. They were posting beach photos on social media while I walked across the stage to empty seats my diploma received with applause from strangers. That summer, when the job offer arrived from a tech startup in San Jose, I accepted immediately. The salary was substantial, the work challenging, and most importantly, it was 2,000 miles away from Madison. I spent weeks planning my move, researching neighborhoods, arranging utilities, and coordinating with the moving company. The day the truck arrived to collect my belongings, my parents were attending a wedding planning session for Amanda's upcoming engagement party. I loaded my life into boxes while they discussed flower arrangements and catering options across town. No one was there to see me take one final look at my childhood bedroom before closing the door forever. The first 6 months in California, I waited for phone calls that never came. I checked my voicemail obsessively, imagining messages expressing concern about my whereabouts or curiosity about my new life. Instead, my phone remained silent. My parents had effectively forgotten I existed, and I had the proof I'd been seeking my entire life. But now, 3 years later, Richard was on the phone, acting as if I'd never left Wisconsin. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. "Jimmy, stop playing games," my father said, his voice regaining some authority. "Your mother set your place at the table last Sunday. Your bedroom is exactly how you left it. We know you're still living here." That's when I realized something had changed. Something had finally forced them to confront reality, and I was about to discover what had shattered their delusion. But first, I needed to understand the depth of their denial. "Dad, when was the last time you actually saw me in person?" Another long pause. Then, incredibly, he said, "You were here for Christmas dinner. You always sit in the same spot." I looked out at the palm trees swaying in the California breeze 3 time zones away from my father's delusion. Christmas had been 8 months ago, and I'd spent it with my coworkers at a beach barbecue in Santa Monica. But somehow, my parents had convinced themselves I was sitting at their dining room table. "Tell me something specific about that Christmas dinner, Dad. What did we talk about? What was I wearing?" The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. When Richard spoke again, his voice carried the first hint of uncertainty I'd ever heard from him. "Your mother handles those details. The important thing is you were there." That's when I realized the truth was far worse than simple neglect. My parents hadn't just failed to notice my absence. They had been actively constructing an elaborate fantasy to avoid confronting it, and I was about to learn just how deep their deception went. "Dad, I need you to listen carefully," I said, standing up and walking to my apartment window. Below me, San Jose stretched out in geometric patterns of urban planning a world away from the tree-lined streets of Madison. I moved to California 3 years ago. I've been living in San Jose this entire time. I have never been back to Wisconsin, not even for a visit. The sound Richard made was somewhere between a laugh and a gasp. "That's impossible. We have mail coming for you constantly. College sends your grades and billing statements. We just renewed your health insurance through our family plan." My blood turned cold. "What mail? What grades?" "Just last week, your mother organized everything on your desk. Financial aid documents, semester reports, that scholarship renewal form you needed to sign." I sank back into my chair, my mind racing. "Dad, who signed that scholarship renewal form?" "Well, your mother helped you with the paperwork. You've always been terrible with administrative details." The room seemed to tilt around me. For 3 years, while I'd been building my career in California, my parents had been actively managing my supposed academic life in Wisconsin. They weren't simply ignoring my absence. They were covering it up with systematic precision. "Richard, I said, using his first name deliberately. "Put Mom on the phone, right now." "She's not here. She's at the college registrar's office handling some paperwork for your upcoming graduation." My hands began to shake. "What graduation? I graduated over a year ago from University of Wisconsin. I walked across that stage alone because you and Susan were in Mexico." "Don't be ridiculous, Jimmy. We have photos from your graduation party right here on the mantle. Your mother invited the whole neighborhood." I closed my eyes, trying to process the magnitude of their delusion. "Describe the photos, Dad. Tell me exactly what you see in these graduation pictures." Another pause. "Well, there's the one of you in your cap and gown standing next to the university sign, and the family photo where we're all together celebrating." "Who took these photos?" "Amanda, of course. She's always been good with the camera." I pulled up Amanda's social media on my laptop, scrolling back through 3 years of posts. Spring graduations, summer vacations, fall football games, winter holidays. Not a single photo included me. Every family gathering showed the same three people, Richard, Susan, and Amanda, smiling and celebrating without any mention of a missing family member. Dad, I want you to go to my bedroom right now. Look around and tell me exactly what you see. I heard footsteps on hardwood floors, the same creaking stairs I remembered from childhood. Richard was breathing heavily by the time he reached the second floor. Okay, I'm here. Your room looks the same as always. Bed-made desk organized, your computer set up just how you like it. Turn on the computer. Jimmy, this is getting ridiculous. Turn it on, Richard. I heard the familiar Windows startup sound through the phone, a noise I recognized from the ancient desktop I'd left behind in college. It's asking for a password. The password is Invisible Sun, with a capital Y and capital S. Silence, then typing, then a longer silence. It says the password is incorrect. Try Forgotten Child with capitals on both words. More typing. That's not working either. Of course not. I'd taken that computer with me to California 3 years ago. It was currently sitting in my closet, replaced by the high-end workstation my company had provided. Whatever computer was on my childhood desk was not the one I'd left behind. Dad, what kind of computer are you looking at? Describe it exactly. It's your black Dell laptop, the one you used all through college. I walked to my closet and pulled out the exact computer he was describing. My black Dell laptop, covered in 3 years of California dust, still decorated with faded stickers from college tech conferences. Richard, I'm looking at my black Dell laptop right now. I'm holding it in my hands in my apartment in California. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of my father's labored breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. That's impossible. I realized I needed help understanding what was happening. I called my college roommate Marcus Thompson, who answered on the second ring with his usual enthusiasm. But Jimmy, man, it's been forever. How's life in Silicon Valley? Marcus, I need to ask you something important. Have my parents ever contacted you about forwarding mail or picking up packages for me? His cheerful tone shifted to confusion. Dude, your parents call me like every 2 months. Your mom always wants me to grab your mail from the college post office. She says you're too busy with advanced coursework to pick it up yourself. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. What kind of mail? The usual stuff. Financial aid documents, grade reports, official college correspondence. Your mom always says you're doing some special accelerated program and can't be interrupted. Marcus, I graduated over a year ago. I've been working in California this entire time. What but your parents just called last month asking me to forward your spring semester grade reports. I felt the foundation of reality shifting beneath me. My parents weren't just living in denial, they were actively orchestrating an elaborate deception involving my former roommate, college administrators, and apparently creating fake documentation to maintain their fantasy. Jimmy, there's something else. Marcus continued. Your parents have been telling everyone you're doing some kind of classified research project. They say that's why you can't talk to family or friends directly. People have been asking about you, and your folks always have these elaborate explanations for why you're unavailable. I thought about Christmas family gatherings, neighborhood barbecues, church events, all the social situations where a missing family member would be noticed and questioned. My parents had developed a comprehensive mythology around my absence, complete with explanations sophisticated enough to satisfy community curiosity for 3 full years. Marcus, who's been asking about me, well, your grandmother calls me sometimes. Dorothy's been pretty persistent about wanting to see you. Your parents always tell her you're too deep into your studies, but she's starting to sound skeptical. My grandmother, Dorothy Brennan. My father's mother, the one person in my family who had ever shown genuine interest in my life. During college, she'd been my most consistent supporter, sending care packages and calling every few weeks to check on my progress. If anyone was going to notice my prolonged absence and demand answers, it would be Grandma Dorothy. What kind of questions is she asking? She wants to know why you never call her directly anymore. She's been asking for your current phone number, but your parents keep saying you're using some special university communication system for security reasons. I felt a chill run down my spine. My grandmother had been actively trying to reach me for 3 years, and my parents had been intercepting and deflecting her attempts. They weren't just maintaining a fantasy for their own benefit. They were manipulating an elderly woman's concern for her grandson to protect their elaborate deception. Marcus, this is important. Did my grandmother say anything about visiting or demanding to see me in person? Actually, yeah. Last time she called, she sounded pretty upset. She said if she doesn't hear from you directly by the end of this month, she's driving down from Minneapolis to see you herself. That was it. The catalyst that had finally broken my parents' carefully constructed illusion. Grandma Dorothy wasn't going to accept vague explanations and convenient excuses anymore. She was threatening to show up in Madison and demand to see her grandson in person, which would expose 3 years of systematic lies to the entire extended family. That's why Richard had called me today. Not out of parental concern or genuine desire to reconnect, but out of panic that their deception was about to collapse under the weight of Dorothy's determination. I realized this was much bigger than simple family dysfunction. My parents had been living in an active state of fraud, manipulating not just their own perception of reality, but deceiving extended family neighbors, college administrators, and anyone else who might notice my absence. The question was, what else had they been doing to maintain this fiction, and what were the legal implications of their deception? I needed answers, and I needed them fast. After ending the call with Marcus, I sat staring at my phone, building courage for a conversation I should have initiated years ago. Finally, I dialed the number I'd memorized but rarely used. Dorothy Brennan speaking. My grandmother's voice carried the same warmth I remembered from childhood, now tinged with age, but still sharp with intelligence. Grandma Dorothy, it's Jimmy. The silence that followed was loaded with 3 years of accumulated concern, frustration, and love. When she spoke again, her voice trembled with emotion. Jimmy, is this really you? Your voice sounds different, older. It's really me, Grandma. I know it's been far too long since we talked. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, she said precisely. Not that I've been counting. Your parents keep telling me you're too busy with your special research program to call family members directly. I took a deep breath. Grandma, I need to tell you something important. I've been living in California for the past 3 years. I'm not in college anymore. I graduated and moved away, and my parents have been lying to you about where I am. The silence stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. When Dorothy spoke again, her voice carried steel beneath the velvet. I knew it. I've been telling your father something wasn't right. A grandson doesn't just disappear for 3 years, no matter how busy he gets with school. What have they been telling you exactly? Oh, they have elaborate stories. You're working on classified government research. You're in a special accelerated doctoral program. You've been selected for some elite academic fellowship that requires complete focus. Every time I ask to visit or want your direct phone number, they have another excuse. My heart ached thinking about my grandmother's worry and confusion over my apparent abandonment. Grandma, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they were intercepting your attempts to contact me. Jimmy, there's something else you need to know. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Your grandfather Frank left you something when he passed 4 years ago. A substantial inheritance specifically for your education. The world stopped spinning. Grandpa Frank had died during my sophomore year of college, and I'd been devastated not just by the loss, but by my parents' apparent indifference to my grief. They'd handled all the funeral arrangements and legal matters while I was in finals week, telling me not to worry about family business and focus on my studies. What kind of inheritance? $200,000 designated specifically for your educational expenses. The will was very clear that the money was for Jimmy Brennan's college costs and future academic pursuits. Your parents were supposed to give it to you when you graduated. My hands began shaking. Grandma, I never received any inheritance money. What do you mean? Richard has been signing the disbursement forms every semester. The bank sends statements showing regular withdrawals for your tuition, housing, and educational expenses. The room began to spin as I processed the implications. My parents hadn't just been lying about my whereabouts, they'd been systematically stealing my inheritance by forging my signature on legal documents. Dorothy, I need to ask you something specific. Do you have copies of those disbursement forms? Oh, of course, dear. I keep meticulous financial records. Would you like me to fax them to you? Yes, please. But first, can you tell me who's been signing them? Well, you have Jimmy. Your signature is right there on every form. I hadn't signed anything related to inheritance or educational expenses in over 3 years, which meant my parents had been committing identity theft and bank fraud on a systematic basis. Grandma, I'm going to give you my real address in California. I need you to send me every document you have related to Grandpa Frank's inheritance. As I gave her my San Jose address, Dorothy's voice grew increasingly upset. Jimmy, are you telling me that Richard and Susan have been stealing your money? That's exactly what I'm telling you. Oh, my dear boy, this is much worse than I thought. The inheritance money was supposed to set you up for life after college. Your grandfather was so proud of your academic achievements. He wanted to make sure you had every opportunity to pursue your dreams. Tears stung my eyes thinking about Grandpa Frank, the one family member who'd consistently encouraged my education and celebrated my accomplishments. He would have been devastated to know his final gift to me had been stolen by his own son. Grandma, how much money are we talking about total Phi? With 4 years of investment growth, the account should be worth approximately $300,000 by now. Plus, there were specific instructions that if any money remained unused after graduation, it would become yours free and clear for whatever purposes you chose. I did quick mental math. If my parents had been making regular withdrawals for fake educational expenses over 4 years, they'd stolen virtually all of my grandfather's inheritance. Money that was legally mine designated specifically for my benefit, systematically taken through forged documents. Dorothy, there's something else. Have you been asking to visit me recently? Every month for the past year. I've been getting increasingly suspicious about these stories your parents tell. Last week, I told Richard that if I don't see you in person by the end of this month, I'm driving to Madison myself and camping on their doorstep until someone produces my grandson. That explained everything. Dorothy's threat to visit had finally forced my parents to acknowledge that maintaining their deception was impossible. They couldn't produce me for a face-to-face meeting because I was 2,000 miles away living a completely independent life they'd been denying for 3 years. Grandma, I think my parents panicked when you threatened to visit. That's why my father called me today demanding I come home immediately. Well, they should be panicking. What they've done is criminal Jimmy. Stealing inheritance money, forging legal documents, lying to family members about your whereabouts. I may be 78 years old, but I'm not stupid. I felt a surge of love for this fierce woman who'd been fighting for me without my knowledge. What do you want me to do, Dorothy? I want you to come visit me in Minneapolis, not Madison here to my house. I want to hear the whole truth about what's been happening, and then I want to help you decide how to handle this situation legally. You'd support me against your own son. But Jimmy. I raised Richard to be honest and responsible. If he's chosen to become a criminal instead, that's his decision. You're my grandson, and your grandfather Frank's money was meant for you. We're going to make sure you get what's rightfully yours. As we talked, I realized the inheritance theft was probably just the beginning. If my parents were sophisticated enough to forge documents and manipulate bank accounts for years without detection, what other financial crimes might they have committed? Grandma, do you know if my parents have been using my name for anything else? Credit cards, tax documents, other financial accounts? Oh dear, I hadn't thought of that possibility. But you're right to be concerned. If they're willing to steal inheritance money, they might be using your identity for other purposes. I felt my world shifting as I contemplated the full scope of potential financial abuse. My parents hadn't just neglected me emotionally. They'd been systematically exploiting my identity for years, using my name and legal status for financial gain, while keeping me completely unaware of their actions. The phone call that had started as my father's demands for a family visit had revealed a criminal conspiracy involving identity theft, bank fraud, and systematic financial abuse stretching back years. But I was about to discover that inheritance theft was just the tip of the iceberg, and the true scope of my parents' deception was far more extensive and dangerous than I could have imagined. The next morning, I took a personal day from work and spent it researching financial crimes and legal remedies. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Identity theft involving family members was more common than I'd realized, and the penalties were severe. Federal charges for bank fraud could result in up to 10 years in prison, while systematic identity theft carried additional penalties that could effectively destroy someone's life. I contacted a tax attorney named Benjamin Walsh, whose office was located in downtown San Jose. Benjamin specialized in financial crimes and had extensive experience with family-related fraud cases. When I explained the situation during our phone consultation, his response was immediate and serious. Jimmy, what you're describing constitutes multiple federal crimes. Identity theft, bank fraud, forgery of legal documents, and potentially tax fraud if they've been claiming you as a dependent while you're filing independently. Your parents could be facing 15 to 20 years in federal prison. The weight of that possibility settled over me like a heavy blanket. Despite everything they'd done, the thought of my parents spending decades in prison felt overwhelming. But Benjamin, what if I don't want to prosecute them? What if I just want the money back? Unfortunately, it's not that simple. When bank fraud and identity theft reach this scale, federal prosecutors often pursue charges regardless of the victim's preferences. The government views these crimes as attacks on the financial system itself. I scheduled an in-person meeting for the following day, giving me time to process the enormity of what I was facing. That evening, I couldn't concentrate on work or television. Instead, I found myself walking through memories of my childhood, trying to understand how emotional neglect had evolved into criminal behavior. I remembered my 8th birthday sitting alone in our empty house while my parents celebrated Amanda's dance competition in Milwaukee. At the time, I'd assumed it was simple thoughtlessness. Now I wondered if there had been signs of manipulative behavior even then. My high school years came into focus with new clarity. While I was winning academic awards and earning college scholarships, my parents showed no interest in my achievements. But they were meticulous about handling my financial aid paperwork, insisting they needed to manage all administrative details. I'd thought they were being helpful. Now I realized they were positioning themselves to control my financial future. College acceptance letters to prestigious universities with full scholarships had disappeared after my parents reviewed them. They'd strongly encouraged me to stay local, attending University of Wisconsin, where they could continue monitoring my finances and academic progress. What I'd interpreted as wanting me close to home was actually about maintaining control over my inheritance money. The pattern was clear in retrospect, but at 18, I'd been grateful for any parental attention even if it came in the form of managing paperwork I found boring. My phone rang, interrupting my analysis. Amanda's name appeared on the screen, which was startling since we hadn't spoken directly in over 2 years. "Jimmy, is that really you?" Her voice carried a tremor I'd never heard before. "Hello, Amanda. This is unexpected. I heard Dad called you yesterday. He's been pacing around the house ever since, muttering about problems with Grandma Dorothy and complications with college paperwork." I felt a chill. "What exactly did he tell you?" "He said you were being difficult about coming home for family dinner and that you were spreading lies about graduating college. But Jimmy, I need to tell you something. I know you've been gone." The admission hung between us like a confession. "What do you mean, you know?" "I've known for at least 2 years that you weren't living here anymore. Your room has this weird museum quality, like everything's been carefully preserved but never actually used. Plus, Mom talks about you in this strange way, like she's describing a character in a book rather than her actual son." I sat down, heavily processing this revelation. "If you knew I was gone, why didn't you say anything?" Amanda's silence stretched uncomfortably before she spoke again. "Because it was easier for everyone if we pretended you were still here, including me." "What do you mean, easier for you?" "Jimmy, they've been using your inheritance money to support my lifestyle. My house down payment, my car loan, my business startup costs. I knew the money was supposed to be yours, but I convinced myself you'd never need it since you were so smart and independent." The betrayal cut deeper than my parents' theft. Amanda had been a willing participant in my financial exploitation, accepting stolen money while remaining silent about my absence. "How much money are we talking about, Amanda Kai-C?" "Over the past 3 years, probably $200,000. Maybe more. Dad handles the financial details, but I know my house cost $160,000 and my business loan was $40,000, plus the monthly expenses they cover." I felt sick thinking about my grandfather's carefully saved money, funding Amanda's comfortable life while I'd struggled through my early career living paycheck to paycheck in expensive California. "Amanda, do you understand that what they're doing is criminal identity theft, bank fraud, forgery?" "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I've been terrified about it for months. My husband David has been asking questions about where all our money comes from. He's an accountant, so he notices things like mysterious cash deposits and unexplained financial support." "What kind of questions?" "He wants to see documentation for the family trust fund Dad claims provides our income. He's threatening to hire an investigator if he doesn't get clear answers about our finances." I realized Amanda's marriage was falling apart due to the stress of participating in fraud. Her husband suspected criminal activity, but didn't know the specifics, creating tension that was destroying their relationship. Jimmy, there's something else you need to know. Amanda's voice dropped to a whisper. I heard Mom and Dad talking about insurance policies. They've been discussing what would happen if something unfortunate happened to you. My blood turned to ice. What kind of insurance policies? Life insurance. Dad said something about a policy worth $500,000 that would solve all their financial problems permanently. The room spun around me as I processed this information. My parents hadn't just been stealing my inheritance and using my identity for financial gain. They'd been discussing my death as a solution to their money problems. Amanda, are you telling me that our parents have taken out life insurance policies on me without my knowledge? I think so, but Jimmy, I don't know the details. I just heard fragments of conversation when they thought I wasn't listening. I felt terror creeping up my spine. Identity theft and bank fraud were serious crimes, but life insurance fraud involving discussions of beneficial deaths moved into completely different territory. Amanda, I need you to find documentation about these insurance policies. Bank statements, policy papers, anything you can locate. I can't do that. If they discover I've been talking to you or gathering evidence against them, they'll cut off all my financial support. I'll lose my house, my business, everything. Amanda, if what you're telling me is true, you're already an accessory to multiple federal crimes. Your only protection is cooperating with authorities and providing evidence. But what about David? What about my marriage? He'll leave me if he finds out I've been living off stolen money for 3 years. I felt a moment of sympathy for my sister, trapped in a web of deception she'd helped create, but was now too frightened to escape. But my sympathy was outweighed by the realization that my parents might be escalating from financial crimes to potentially violent solutions. Amanda, listen to me carefully. If our parents are discussing life insurance payouts in the context of solving their problems, I could be in physical danger. You need to help me gather evidence before someone gets hurt. The line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. When Amanda spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. Jimmy, I'm scared. I'm scared of what they might do if they realize we're working together. I'm scared of losing everything I've built with stolen money, but I'm most scared that you're right about the danger. Then help me end this before it gets worse. Okay, I'll try to find documentation about the insurance policies, but Jimmy promised me you'll be careful. If they're really discussing extreme solutions, you might not be safe even in California. After ending the call with Amanda, I sat in my apartment staring out at the San Jose skyline, realizing my parents' criminal behavior was far more extensive and dangerous than I'd imagined. What had started as emotional neglect had evolved into systematic financial abuse and was now potentially escalating into discussions of insurance fraud involving my death. I needed legal protection immediately, and I needed to accelerate my timeline for confronting this situation before it spiraled completely out of control. Benjamin Walsh's office occupied the 32nd floor of a gleaming downtown San Jose high-rise. When I arrived for our meeting, his expression was grim as he spread documents across his conference table. Jimmy, I spent yesterday researching your family's financial history. What I've discovered is far worse than simple inheritance theft. He handed me a thick folder filled with official-looking documents. Your parents have taken out 3 separate life insurance policies on you over the past 2 years, with a combined death benefit of $800,000. The room seemed to tilt sideways. $800,000. The policies were purchased using forged signatures and falsified medical records. They've been paying premiums using money from your grandfather's inheritance account, essentially using your own money to bet on your death. I stared at the insurance document, seeing my signature reproduced with disturbing accuracy across multiple forms. The forgery was sophisticated, suggesting my parents had been practicing my handwriting or had professional assistance. Hey, Benjamin, this constitutes conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, doesn't it? Among other charges. But Jimmy, there's more. I also discovered that your parents have been filing joint tax returns claiming you as a dependent for the past 3 years, while simultaneously you've been filing as an independent California resident. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Double tax fraud. Exactly. Both sets of returns can't be legitimate, which means someone has been systematically defrauding the IRS. Given the substantial income differences between your parents and yourself, the financial impact could be significant. I thought about my California tax returns filed honestly each year with my substantial software engineer salary. Meanwhile, my parents had been claiming me as a dependent on their Wisconsin returns, potentially receiving thousands of dollars in fraudulent deductions and credits. What are the federal penalties for this level of tax fraud? Combined with the identity theft and insurance fraud, we're looking at potential sentences of 15 to 20 years in federal prison. The government takes tax fraud very seriously, especially when it involves forged documents and systematic deception over multiple years. My phone buzzed with a text message from Amanda. Found insurance documents in Dad's office. 3 policies total. Also found bank statements showing they've been forging your signature for 4 years, not 3. It started before you graduated. I showed Benjamin the message. His expression darkened further. Jimmy, your sister just provided evidence that the fraud began while you were still living at home and attending college. That means your parents were planning this systematic exploitation for years, possibly since your grandfather died. The betrayal felt crushing. While I'd been focusing on my studies and planning my future, my parents had been methodically positioning themselves to steal my inheritance and exploit my identity for maximum financial benefit. There's one more thing, Benjamin continued. I contacted the insurance company that issued the largest policy. They confirmed that your parents recently increased the coverage amount and changed the beneficiary structure. Your mother is now listed as the sole beneficiary of all 3 policies. My hands began shaking as I processed the implications. My parents hadn't just taken out life insurance on me. They'd been actively modifying the policies to maximize their potential payout, while eliminating any chance that benefits might go to other family members. Benjamin, my sister, mentioned that she overheard them discussing what would happen if something unfortunate happened to me. Given these insurance policies, should I be concerned about my physical safety? His expression grew deadly serious. Jimmy, I need to be direct with you. Insurance fraud cases sometimes escalate when perpetrators feel cornered. The fact that your parents have multiple policies worth hundreds of thousands of dollars combined with their systematic pattern of fraud suggests a level of criminal sophistication that concerns me. My phone rang. Richard's name appeared on the screen. Don't answer, Benjamin advised. We need to establish legal protections before you have any further contact with them. But I was tired of being passive. I'd spent 3 years being invisible to my parents. Today, I was going to force them to see me clearly. Hello, Richard. Jimmy, we need to talk immediately. There are some problems with your college paperwork that require your immediate attention. I bet there are problems, like the fact that I graduated over a year ago, and you've been forging my signature on financial documents ever since. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my father's labored breathing. Son, I don't know what you think you know, but you're clearly confused about some things. I know about Grandpa Frank's inheritance money. I know about the forged disbursement forms. I know about the life insurance policies you've taken out on me. And I know about the tax fraud you've been committing for years. Jimmy, you need to calm down and think rationally. These are serious accusations you're making against your own family. They're not accusations, Richard. They're facts. And tomorrow morning, I'm filing a federal complaint for identity theft, bank fraud, insurance fraud, and systematic tax evasion. You wouldn't dare destroy your own family over a misunderstanding about paperwork. Watch me. I ended the call and looked at Benjamin. What's our next step? First, we file for immediate restraining orders against both parents. Second, we contact the FBI Financial Crimes Unit to report the insurance fraud. Third, we notify the IRS about the tax fraud. And fourth, we make sure you have personal security arrangements until this is resolved. Personal security? Jimmy, your parents are facing potential decades in federal prison because of evidence you're providing. People have been hurt for less than that. Until they're in custody, you should assume you're in danger. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with another call. This time, it was Susan. Now, Jimmy, sweetheart, your father tells me you're upset about some college paperwork. Why don't you come home so we can sort this out as a family? Why? I'm not coming home, Susan. I'm not your son anymore. I'm the victim of your crimes. Jimmy, you're being dramatic. We've always handled your financial matters because you asked us to. Remember you said paperwork made you anxious. I did remember saying that years ago when I was 18 and overwhelmed by college administrative requirements. But I'd been talking about helping me organize documents, not forging my signature and stealing my inheritance. Susan, I have copies of bank documents with my forged signature. I have insurance policies I never signed. I have tax returns filed in my name while I was living in California. This isn't about paperwork confusion. Honey, you're clearly confused about some things. Why don't you talk to your sister Amanda can help explain how family finances work? I already talked to Amanda. She told me about the house down payment, the business loan, and all the other expenses you've been paying with my grandfather's money. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. When Susan spoke again, her voice had lost all warmth. Jimmy, you need to be very careful about the accusations you're making. You could hurt a lot of people with irresponsible claims. Is that a threat, Susan? It's advice from someone who loves you. I looked at Benjamin, who was taking notes and recording the conversation on his phone. He nodded approvingly. Susan, here's some advice from someone who doesn't love you anymore. Tomorrow morning, federal investigators will be contacting you about multiple fraud charges. I suggest you hire a good criminal defense attorney. After ending the call, Benjamin and I spent the next 2 hours preparing documentation for federal authorities. The scope of my parents' criminal behavior was staggering: systematic identity theft, bank fraud, insurance fraud, tax evasion, and forgery spanning at least 4 years. But I was about to learn that even this extensive criminal enterprise was just one part of a much larger pattern of fraud that extended far beyond my own victimization. The FBI Financial Crimes Office in San Francisco was located in a sterile federal building that smelled like disinfectant and serious consequences. Agent Patricia Valdez specialized in family-related financial crimes, and her expression remained professionally neutral as I recounted my parents' 4-year fraud operation. Mr. Brennan, what you're describing fits a pattern we've been tracking. Your parents may be part of a larger inheritance fraud scheme targeting elderly relatives and their beneficiaries. She spread photographs across the table showing documents from other cases. In the past 5 years, we've investigated 12 similar situations where family members systematically stole inheritance money using forged signatures and false documentation. My blood ran cold. You think my parents have done this to other people? The sophistication of their operation suggests experience. Forging signatures accurately enough to fool bank officials requires practice. Creating believable documentation for college expenses and medical records indicates systematic planning. Most first-time fraudsters make obvious mistakes that get caught quickly. Agent Valdez pulled up a computer database showing cross-referenced financial crimes. Your parents' names appear in connection with 3 other inheritance disputes over the past 6 years. All involved elderly relatives leaving money to younger family members, and all resulted in mysterious complications with beneficiary access. The scope of their criminal enterprise was breathtaking. While I'd been focused on my own victimization, Richard and Susan had apparently been running a family-based fraud operation targeting multiple relatives and their heirs. Agent Valdez, what kind of sentences are we looking at for this level of systematic fraud? Given the multi-state nature of the crimes, the substantial amounts involved, and the pattern of repeat offenses, federal prosecutors typically seek sentences of 15 to 25 years. Your parents would likely spend the rest of their lives in prison. The weight of that reality settled over me like a heavy blanket. Despite everything they'd done, imagining my parents dying in federal prison felt overwhelming. What if I want to recover my money but not necessarily destroy their lives? Mr. Brennan, I understand the conflict you're feeling, but systematic fraud at this level isn't a family matter. It's a federal crime that threatens the integrity of financial institutions. Prosecutors rarely offer lenient plea bargains for organized fraud operations. My phone buzzed with a call from Dorothy. I stepped into the hallway to answer. Jimmy dear, I just received a very interesting phone call from your father. He wanted to know if I'd been talking to you recently. What did you tell him? I told him that I talk to my grandson whenever I please, and that I'm planning to visit him very soon to see how he's doing. Grandma, that might not be safe right now. The situation with my parents is more serious than we originally thought. Jimmy, I'm 78 years old, and I've been dealing with difficult people for longer than you've been alive. Your father doesn't scare me. I felt a surge of love for Dorothy's fierce independence, but also genuine concern for her safety. Grandma, my parents are facing serious federal charges for fraud and identity theft. If they feel cornered, they might do something desperate. All the more reason to make sure they face justice quickly. Jimmy, I've been doing some research of my own, and I found something disturbing. What kind of research? I contacted your cousin Michael in Denver. His grandfather, my brother Thomas, died 2 years ago and left him a substantial inheritance. but Michael's been having trouble accessing the money due to complications with the executor. My heart stopped. Who's the executor of Thomas's will? Your father, Richard. He was named executor because he has experience handling family financial matters. The room began to spin as I processed this information. My parents hadn't just been stealing my inheritance. They'd been using their position as executors to systematically defraud other family members across multiple states. Dorothy, does Michael know about the problems with his inheritance? He knows he's supposed to receive $200,000, but Richard keeps telling him there are legal complications that require more time to resolve. It's been 18 months since Thomas died. I realized I needed to contact Michael immediately and warn him about what was happening. If my parents were stealing inheritance money from multiple family members, the scope of their fraud operation was far larger than anyone had imagined. Grandma, I need Michael's phone number, and I need you to contact every family member who's had recent inheritance situations involving Richard as executor. Jimmy, how many people do you think they've victimized? I don't know, but the FBI thinks this could be a multi-state fraud operation involving dozens of victims and millions of dollars. After ending the call with Dorothy, I returned to Agent Valdez's office with new information about additional victims and cross-state fraud. Her expression grew increasingly serious as I explained the pattern of inheritance theft involving multiple family members. Mr. Brennan, what you're describing sounds like organized criminal activity. We may need to involve multiple federal agencies and coordinate with state authorities in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Colorado, and possibly other states. The investigation was expanding rapidly beyond my personal situation. My parents weren't just neglectful family members who'd made poor financial decisions. They were sophisticated criminals who'd been systematically exploiting family relationships for years. Agent Valdez, what happens next? We coordinate immediate arrests before they have time to destroy evidence or flee. Based on what you've provided today, federal warrants will be issued within 48 hours. My phone rang again. This time it was Amanda, and she sounded terrified. Jimmy, you need to be careful. Dad's been making phone calls all morning, and I heard him talking about solving the problem permanently. What kind of phone calls? I don't know the details, but he mentioned something about insurance claims and accidents. Jimmy, I think he's planning something terrible. Agent Valdez was listening to my side of the conversation and immediately began making phone calls to coordinate protective custody and accelerated arrests. Amanda, you need to get out of the house immediately. Go somewhere public and stay there until the FBI contacts you. What about David? What about my marriage? Amanda, if our parents are planning to hurt me, your marriage problems are secondary. Get to safety and cooperate with federal authorities. As I ended the call, Agent Valdez approached with urgent instructions. Mr. Brennan, we're implementing immediate protective measures. Federal marshals will escort you to a secure location until arrests are completed. Your parents are now considered dangerous suspects in an active criminal investigation. Looking back, I realized that what had started as a simple phone call about family dinner had revealed a sophisticated criminal enterprise that threatened multiple victims across several states. My parents' emotional neglect had been just the surface layer of much deeper criminal behavior that was finally coming to light. But justice was about to be served, and I was determined to make sure every victim got the resolution they deserved. The federal courthouse in Madison, Wisconsin was exactly as I remembered from childhood field trips, imposing limestone architecture designed to remind visitors that justice was serious business. 6 months after my father's first phone call, I sat in the gallery watching Richard and Susan Brennan receive their sentences for what prosecutors called one of the most sophisticated family-based fraud schemes in federal history. The investigation had revealed 12 families victimized across 6 states, with total financial losses exceeding $3.2 million. My parents had been systematically targeting elderly relatives and their heirs for over 8 years, using their position as trusted family members to gain access to inheritance accounts, life insurance policies, and estate planning documents. Judge Margaret Chen read the charges with methodical precision: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, systematic identity theft, forgery of federal documents, tax evasion, insurance fraud, and racketeering. The evidence presented during the 6-week trial painted a picture of criminal sophistication that shocked even experienced federal prosecutors. Richard and Susan Brennan. Judge Chen announced, "Your crimes represent a fundamental betrayal of family trust that has devastated multiple generations of victims. The systematic nature of your fraud operation combined with these substantial financial losses inflicted on elderly and vulnerable family members demands severe federal penalties. Richard received 22 years in federal prison. Susan received 18 years. Both would be eligible for parole after serving 85% of their sentences, meaning they would likely spend the rest of their lives incarcerated. I felt no satisfaction watching my parents accept their fate with stone-faced resignation. The emotional relief I'd expected was replaced by a complex mixture of sadness, anger, and profound grief for the family relationships that could have been, but never were. Amanda sat beside me, having cooperated extensively with federal investigators in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Her marriage to David had survived the scandal largely because she'd voluntarily entered therapy and made full financial restitution for money she'd knowingly accepted. David's accounting background had actually proven valuable in helping federal agents trace the complex web of fraudulent transactions. "I keep thinking about what our family could have been," Amanda whispered as our parents were led away in handcuffs. "I stopped thinking about that years ago," I replied honestly. "They made their choices long before any of us understood the consequences." Dorothy squeezed my hand from the seat beside me. At 78, she'd been the prosecution's star witness, providing decades of correspondence and financial records that established the pattern of systematic fraud. Her testimony had been devastating in its clarity and heartbreaking in its evidence of long-term emotional manipulation. "Your grandfather Frank would be proud of you today," she said quietly. "You stood up for what was right, even when it meant confronting your own family." The financial recovery had been substantial. Federal investigators seized Richard and Susan's assets, including their house vehicles, investment accounts, and Amanda's business. The total recovery exceeded $2.8 million, allowing nearly complete restitution to all identified victims. My share of the recovered funds, combined with legitimate inheritance money that had been restored through the legal process, totaled just over $400,000. More importantly, the insurance policies taken out on my life had been voided, and the forged tax returns had been corrected through cooperation with the IRS. But the real victory was systemic change. The case had prompted new federal legislation requiring additional verification procedures for inheritance disbursements and insurance policies involving family members. My story had been featured in congressional testimony supporting the Family Financial Protection Act, designed to prevent similar fraud schemes in the future. 6 months after the sentencing, I was back in California, but my life had changed in ways I never could have anticipated. The traumatic experience of exposing my parents' crimes had led me to therapy with Dr. Sarah Martinez, a specialist in family trauma and financial abuse. What started as professional counseling had gradually evolved into something deeper. Sarah had helped me understand that my childhood invisibility was a form of systematic emotional abuse that created vulnerability to financial exploitation. Recovery meant learning to value myself enough to demand honest relationships and appropriate boundaries. "Jimmy, you've created something beautiful out of tremendous pain," Sarah observed during one of our sessions that had transitioned from professional to personal. "The scholarship fund you established will help other young people escape family situations that could lead to similar exploitation." The Frank Brennan Memorial Scholarship Fund provided educational support for students from financially abusive households. Using my recovered inheritance money, along with donations from other fraud victims, we'd established an endowment that would support 20 students annually in pursuing higher education while maintaining independence from potentially exploitative family members. The scholarship recipients came from situations remarkably similar to my own academically gifted young people whose families viewed their success as a resource to be controlled rather than celebrated. Each recipient received not just financial support, but also legal counseling and therapeutic resources to help them establish healthy independence. Thanksgiving dinner that year was unlike any holiday meal I'd experienced in my life. Dorothy had moved to a senior community just 30 minutes from my San Jose apartment, allowing us to build the relationship we'd both wanted for years. Amanda and David visited from Wisconsin, their marriage stronger after surviving the crisis of criminal exposure and financial restitution. Sarah joined us officially as my girlfriend, but practically as the emotional cornerstone of my recovery process. She'd helped me learn that healthy families were built on mutual respect, honest communication, and genuine care for each member's well-being. "I'm grateful for second chances," Amanda said during our dinner toast. "I know I participated in something terrible, but I'm learning to build relationships based on honesty instead of financial convenience." David nodded agreement. The therapy process has taught us both that real love requires accountability. Amanda's willingness to testify against Richard and Susan despite the personal cost showed me who she really is when given the chance to choose integrity. Dorothy raised her glass with a smile that reminded me of Grandpa Frank. I'm grateful for a grandson who chose justice over convenience even when it meant exposing painful truths about his own family. I looked around the table at this chosen family we'd created from the ruins of genetic relationships that had been poisoned by criminal behavior. I'm grateful for learning the difference between family members and people who actually love you. Sarah squeezed my hand. And I'm grateful for meeting someone who understands that real love means protecting people from harm, even when that protection requires difficult decisions. The scholarship fund had grown beyond our original expectations, now supporting 42 students across 12 states. Many recipients stayed in contact, sharing stories of educational achievements and career successes that their families had tried to prevent or control. One recipient, Maria Santos from Phoenix, wrote to thank me for helping her escape a family situation where her parents had been stealing her financial aid money and preventing her from completing her nursing degree. With scholarship support and legal assistance, she'd graduated with honors and was now working as a pediatric nurse while pursuing her master's degree. "Your story gave me courage to seek help," Maria wrote. "I thought family financial abuse was normal until I learned about your case and realized that parents are supposed to support their children's success, not sabotage it for personal gain." Stories like Maria's reminded me why exposing my parents' crimes had been necessary despite the personal cost. Criminal behavior disguised as family dynamics would continue destroying lives until victims found the courage to seek justice. Looking back 18 months later, I realized the phone call that started this journey had been the catalyst for my real-life beginning. For 28 years, I'd been invisible to people who were supposed to love me. The process of forcing them to see me clearly had been painful, but it had also revealed who I actually was when freed from their expectations and manipulation. My relationship with Sarah had taught me what healthy love looked like. She supported my career achievements, encouraged my personal growth, and respected my boundaries without needing to control my financial resources or life decisions. We were planning to move in together, creating a home based on mutual respect rather than dysfunction and exploitation. The work I was doing with the scholarship fund had given me a sense of purpose that went far beyond personal recovery. Every student we helped represented a life trajectory, changed from potential victimization to independent success. Amanda and I maintained regular contact, building a sibling relationship based on honesty about our shared trauma and commitment to preventing similar abuse. She'd become an advocate for financial abuse awareness, speaking at conferences and support groups about the warning signs of family-based fraud. Dorothy remained the anchor of our reconstructed family, providing the unconditional love and support that grandparents are supposed to offer. Her decision to testify against her own son had required tremendous courage, but it had also created space for authentic relationships with grandchildren she'd been prevented from knowing. Richard and Susan would be incarcerated for at least 15 more years. I'd chosen not to visit them or maintain any contact, a decision that had required extensive therapy, but ultimately provided peace. Some relationships were too poisoned by betrayal and criminal behavior to be salvaged even with family members. The most important lesson I'd learned was that true family isn't determined by genetics or legal obligations, but by genuine love, mutual respect, and commitment to each other's well-being. Sometimes the greatest act of love is holding people accountable for harmful behavior, even when those people are your parents. My story had been featured in magazines, congressional testimony, and legal journals as an example of how family financial abuse could escalate into organized criminal activity. But the real impact was personal learning to value myself enough to demand honest relationships and create boundaries that protected my well-being. As I finished writing the annual report for the scholarship fund, I reflected on how much had changed since that Tuesday morning phone call from Richard. I'd gone from being invisible to my own family to becoming an advocate for other victims of financial abuse. The pain of exposing my parents' crimes had been transformed into purpose through helping other people escape similar situations. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Maria Santos, now Dr. Maria Santos, calling to tell me she'd been accepted to a doctoral program in pediatric nursing research. Jimmy. I wanted you to know that everything you went through to create this scholarship fund has changed my life completely. I'm going to dedicate my research to helping children from abusive families access health care and educational resources. Congratulations, Maria. Your success makes everything worthwhile. I have one question for you. Do you ever regret exposing your parents and sending them to prison? I looked out my apartment window at the California sunshine, thinking about the question that many people asked, but few understood. Maria, I regret that they chose criminal behavior over genuine family relationships. I regret that I spent 28 years being invisible to people who were supposed to love me. But I don't regret choosing justice over convenience, even when it meant confronting my own family. Thank you for choosing courage over comfort. Your decision created opportunities for dozens of people like me. After ending the call, I realized that choosing justice had been the first time in my life I truly valued myself enough to demand appropriate treatment. The process had been painful, but it had also been the foundation for every positive change that followed. The greatest gift hadn't been financial recovery or legal justice, though both were important. The greatest gift had been learning that I deserved love, respect, and honest relationships, and that I had the power to create those relationships with people who truly cared about my well-being. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept unacceptable behavior even from family members. Sometimes justice requires courage that feels impossible until you realize the alternative is living in lies that destroy everyone they touch. My parents had taught me about betrayal manipulation and criminal exploitation disguised as family loyalty. But Dorothy, Amanda, Sarah, and the scholarship recipients had taught me about authentic love, mutual respect, and the power of choosing relationships based on genuine care rather than genetic obligation. Looking forward, I knew my story would continue evolving as the scholarship fund grew and more victims found the courage to seek justice. But the fundamental lesson remained constant. True family is built on love that empowers rather than controls, supports rather than exploits, and celebrates success rather than stealing from it. The phone call that had started with demands for family dinner had ended with me creating the family I'd always deserved, built on foundations of honesty, respect, and authentic care for each member's well-being. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and personal justice when you discovered someone you trusted was betraying that trust? How do you think you would handle discovering that family members were systematically stealing from you while pretending to care about your well-being? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about how you've handled difficult family situations or times when you had to choose integrity over convenience. Please like this video. If my story resonated with you, subscribe for more content about overcoming family trauma and building healthy relationships, and share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding the signs of financial abuse. Thank you for taking this journey with me and for supporting the work we're doing to help other people escape similar situations. Remember that choosing justice isn't always easy, but it's always worth it when it creates space for authentic love and respect to flourish. Until next time, keep choosing courage over comfort and building relationships based on genuine care rather than manipulation or control.